everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Viz. Today I have the honor of inviting Heather back again to give us a little bit of deep dive into her IronViz entry, which is Only To Be Sociable. This Viz is really interesting because I think the points that she pointed out in this Viz also resonates with like most Asian households. Because when I was growing up or when I was coming of age to drink alcohol, social settings usually have this unspoken rule that you drink to blend in. And I remember being out in the clubs with my friends and everyone's drinking and I don't really like alcohol, but they kind of force it down. And then it's like, if you don't drink, you're not part of the gang and stuff like that. So it's peer pressure from most sense. And I think Heather's Viz basically summarizes that. And also, she has taken a very controversial step in including the export to SV function within Tableau. I think that is a very widely debated option in the data visualization world. But for her, this, it makes perfect sense because you're creating a market list for ingredients that you would buy as an alternative to drinking alcohol, right? So over to you, Heather, to give us a little intro on how this Viz inspiration came about and how long you took to get this up.
Fantastic. Thanks. I think to get this one over the line was less time than my previous entry, which took over 80 hours. But yeah, it was still a bit of an undertaking. As you said, we're looking at consumption of alcohol, what it means to not be a drinker. Certainly in Australia, we're very much a drinking culture. There's only 19.3% of Australians that are not drinkers. So what does that mean when you try and go out? How much alcohol is on the menu? There's plenty of stats in there, which is what IronViz is all about after all, the analysis. But I think for me, the Mocktail mixer, this part at the end is really what inspired the whole topic. So I had been looking into these non-alcoholic cocktails and how you go about making them. And I was sort of struck by, as you do when you start diving into making anything in the kitchen, there's a whole bunch of new ingredients and things that you don't normally use. How do you optimize what you're going to do? You're going to buy a whole bunch of ingredients that you're only going to use a little bit of, particularly where we're talking about like fresh perishable ingredients. How do you get the most bang for your buck? And I had this idea that like if I put all of the recipes into a JSON format, I could then use the data to do some kind of analysis on it. But I never got too far into it until the theme of the IronViz was announced as food and drink. And that's where I started digging this one back up and actually formalizing my JSON, because the JSON was a little bit cagey to begin with. This is what I ended up with. Each of the mocktails has a name, what kind of glass it's in, servings, what the ingredients are, and what the instructions are, so that I could then use that to structure the data. But Tableau doesn't love reading JSON. It will do it, but it wasn't getting me exactly what I wanted. So I thought, okay, I'll do it in Tableau Prep Builder because I've been trying to learn how to do that better. Tableau Prep Builder does not like JSON. Knime, however, was okay with it. So I pulled out Knime, which I am a lot more familiar with, and was able to finally figure out how to do JSON properly and break it into 3 separate CSV files. So we got there, I got it in, and then I started messing around with it so I could do things like this. I've got my little Rolodex type feature here, so I can select by letter and find the recipes. Once I find a recipe I want to have a look at, I can click on it and that selects it down here. So I can see what those ingredients are. Little pluses next to it mean that that's not something that I currently have on a shopping list. So I can just click these little pluses to add things to the shopping list and the little pluses will disappear. That was kind of cool. That was a fun little project. The way that comes about is there's a lot of parameter actions going on here. So this actually is my shopping list parameter. It's a string. So anybody who's done any sort of Python coding, it's basically like a list. My parameter actions are like string manipulation. And so I've got a reference for each of my ingredients. I've had Knime put in a little ranking reference. So every one of them's got a number, and that coincides with a position along the string. And so I just go, okay, at position this, if it's currently N for no, change it to a Y for yes, then everything else is checking for that. You see a plus if there's an N in that position, but if there's a Y in that position, you see nothing, and all those things. So you get that kind of multi-select parameter type situation, which you can't get any other way at the moment, because parameters can only have one thing in them at a time. So the one thing that's in this parameter is that whole string that has all of the details into it, which is a bit complicated, but I've done this before. So it's a very similar setup to how I had things working with the back end of the Tableau Vision Song Contest. So yeah, once we've selected things, they go on the shopping list here, and I've got this export to CSV button, which uses a URL action. I ended up going through some really old posts, how to do your exports, and because I wanted it to be really easy for the user. I didn't want the user to have a situation where they had to scroll through all of the different views that were in the dashboard before they could find the one that they needed to export. I didn't want to have to put instructions around that. I wanted to make it really, really simple and straightforward. And so this is simply the link to the workbook. And at the end of the URL, there's simply .csv. So that tells us that it's going to export it to CSV. That came through Andy Kriebel. There's a very old tip from him. And then I discovered that if you're using a parameter, which of course we are, you can include that in the URL, and that will control what appears in the Viz when it opens. So long as I've got the name of the parameter in here and I've got all the right bits in front of it, it will open automatically the very first view that's in the list. I just put a dot at the beginning of the name of the view and then have all of that detail there. So it will export a CSV, opens a new page, and automatically starts that download. I impressed myself with that one. I was buzzing after I got that one done. It was not easy to go to sleep after that. So I don't think anybody has been quite that happy about putting a export to CSV function on any dashboard ever. Maybe we can all come to terms with being asked to put exports on our workbooks if we can do really cool stuff like that, right?
That's true. So firstly, I think you are oversimplifying the amount of work that you've done over here in terms of like how you use the parameters to switch between the true and false, putting the items into the set so that it appears in that sheet, and just little hacks that people aren't aware of that makes things a lot easier, like renaming the sheet with a dot in front so that it appears at the very first of the list, so that when you do that little hacky URL action, that's the first one that gets pulled out. These are the things that people don't talk about, and I'm happy that you basically laid it out for us because this is really impressive. I've been looking at your Vizes since like probably last year, and in just 1 year, you have created so many Vizes that are technically profound. You have the sci-fi data verse, you have the Tableau Vision Song Contest, which is a parody on the Eurovision thing, and the amount of technical knowledge you need to hack Tableau is just mind-blowing to me at this point. So I'm just blown away with how you managed to create this shopping layers, how you managed to do like the URL action to allow people to download the CSV. And this is really amazing work. For anyone who's just looking this at face value, they wouldn't understand all these nitty-gritty details. But as someone who has building dashboards for work, these are the things that would save lives in literal sense. For us, we're not saving lives like doctors, but all these little hacks save dashboard developers' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of niggly little tricks, and I find it fun to ferret about and find, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make something like this work? And I think one of the big aha moments for me in learning Tableau was realizing that parameters were like global variables. in Python programming. And that light bulb went off when I figured that one out, because suddenly I can think about using Tableau in a different way. And it allows me to do some things that maybe it wasn't meant to do, but it will quite happily play along if you give it the right commands. I enjoy jumping into all of that, and I don't mind going down a rabbit hole.
I think you raised a very important point on what distinguishes Tableau from the other BI tools, because of the whole functionality of parameters being used. Can think about is in a very programmatic way. For me at work, one of the key asks from people, especially those that don't have technical knowledge in SQL skills, they want a tool to allow them to do self-service, kind of do a little exploration of data, and parameters like this help to create that user experience for them. And it's not just that, even with financial modeling, if you want to do a what if analysis, I mean, you could probably do it in Excel, but you can also do it from a dashboard point of view. You can create that user experience for them to do that in a safe environment and making sure that the data is pointing back to real actual data. So I think this has a lot of use cases. And one more nifty trick that you employed in your dashboard that you didn't talk about was the apple equals orange trick. I think that is something that has been widely used by a lot of people, because Tableau has this very weird behavior when you click on something and it highlights it. So what you've employed is basically just a Boolean action, a value called apple and a value called orange. And when you set apple into orange, it always resets the filters because both values are not the same. This actually resets the highlight action that you get when you click on something. And this is a lifesaver in many cases for my dashboard development.
Yeah, it's a UI thing for me, that when people know that they're in a dashboard, maybe the highlight is an expected feature. That's something that they expect to see. I think with the Tableau public work, often you blur that line between it being a dashboard and it being a website effectively. And so the expectation of the user is different. There's a sense that, okay, I'm going to click on this, and then when I click on the next thing, I want to interact with that immediately. And you can't do that if the first click is actually clearing the previous highlight. So for Tableau public work, I will generally use the apple and orange trick that I picked up from Kevin Wee, particularly where you're talking about Tableau public with a long viz. The thing that they clicked on last might not be on the screen anymore. It might not be obvious to the user that they are still having something selected. So it's just a confusing situation that you might just want to make easier for them. So I've got up on the screen the settings that I have to put in place in order to make it work. You tick these things and just make sure that the target sheet's selected, and you've got the apple and the orange down here, and it sorts itself out. So
as a wrapping up conversation, what is your favorite mocktail among all the recipes that you research?
Oh, there's still some of them that I haven't tried because I was, too busy building the Viz. But the one that I have done most often is the Irish cream recipe. That's worked out quite well. That's probably one of my favorites. So, yeah.
So, funny story about this one. I was in Tableau conference the year before. We had the late night and I was nursing a hangover because we had too much to drink. Went down to my hotel lobby to the cafe. I was going through the list and I was like, oh, maybe I need a coffee to freshen up. And I saw this, you have cafe latte, you have cappuccino, you have espresso, long black, and then Irish coffee.
Irish coffee, yes.
Yeah. And I was like, Irish coffee, I've never had that before. Let me just go with that. And when the waiter served me that and I took the first sip, I was like, man, this has a strong punch. So for those who don't know, Irish coffee is basically Irish cream with alcohol in it. So it usually uses Irish whiskey in it. So I didn't know that because, in my defense, the Irish coffee was placed in the coffee list itself. So it's very misleading because it should have been in its own list of alcoholic drinks.
That's what we call hair of the dog.
Cool. So I think we have everything we need from you, Heather, and thank you so much for walking us through. There's so many layers of parameter actions and filter actions and technical knowledge to get behind this. I hope everyone learned something from this, and we'll see everyone at the next episode. Thank you.